Training camp practice day 2 ended with a surprise, so that's where we're going to start today's episode, but we will get into all the action on the field as well as the latest updates from around the franchise. All of that right now on the Locked On Commanders podcast.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Commanders fans, to the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, free and available on all platforms. And we thank you for making us your first listen of the day, regardless of what platform you're watching, even if you're watching on the WUSA 9 Plus app, a new app for your CBS affiliate in Washington, D.C. It's a game changer for local news and sports in the DMV. Download the WUSA 9 Plus app now from your Roku or Amazon Fire TV stick. I'm David Harrison, covering the Commanders for Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation. My co-host Chris Russell, the Rooster, is one half of the Russell and Medhurst show on the Team 980. You can find them both there every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to noon Eastern time, or anytime along with this show on the Audacy app. When we're not there or here, we're on Twitter at DHarrison82, at WrestleMania621, and at LO Commanders.
All right, David, thanks you again, Commanders fans, for making us your first view and or listen of the day, as David just kind of mentioned. And we start this episode with a bunch of Washington Commanders news, but we start with the surprising end, and that is of Antonio Gandy-Golden's NFL career, David. 2020 fourth-round pick out of Liberty, and a guy who many draft pundits, and we weren't working together at the time, so I don't remember what you thought of him, but many draft pundits thought this was the diamond in the rough. This was the steal. This was the mystery man, because he came out of this small school and yet this big body with all sorts of catch radius, and he just retired after a 2-year NFL career that spanned one catch and one rushing attempt. The rushing attempt, I may have been at the catch game. I'm not sure. I don't remember it. I know I was at the game that he ran his only career rush. It was in Cleveland. It was an 11-yard gain, I think, off the left edge on an end around. That's it. That's Antonio Gandy-Golden's career. How surprised were you when you heard that news?
I was very surprised. Honestly, so just kind of put everybody in the setting, right? I know you're going to be familiar with this, right? But practice ends about 3 minutes early because Cole Kelly threw 2 interceptions and 3 passes, which is an amazing way to end practice. So
is that good for Cole Kelly's chances to make the roster?
That is not good for Cole Kelly's chances. Right. It is good for a couple of lower, third string type defensive players, including the defensive end that picked off the first pass and ran it back for a pick 6. So that notwithstanding, practice ends. Like I said, there's about 3 minutes left on the clock. Practice ended. So everybody moseys on over to the media tent, and Ron Rivera, just like he did yesterday, immediately ushered in by PR. But the director of football communications for the Washington Commanders, Sean, he gets up to the microphone, and as soon as he stepped up to the microphone, he goes, "Hey guys, Ron, Coach Rivera's here, but he's going to start with a statement." I got to be honest with you, Chris. Immediately, I was like, "Oh, Dan said something," because honestly, we weren't really tracking. At least not I wasn't. The people I were talking to, we were paying attention to practice. Like we knew that the Dan Snyder stuff was happening, and I kind of had a notion that it wasn't live, which I thought was kind of weird at first, but caught up later and everything, found out what. But in my mind, Dan Snyder potentially is talking to Congress as practice is going on and coming to an end. So I was like, "Oh, Dan said something," and Ron's going to kind of give a cursory, like, "Look, I know the question's coming, so I'm just going to get it out of the way." But no, instead he goes and says, "Hey, I know that all you all noticed Antonio Gandy-Golden not on the practice field. It's because he told me he's retiring." And that was a talk they had in the morning. And yeah, everybody was surprised. In fact, as soon as Coach got done, wishing him well and said he's going to go back to school, and they talked about it, and he feels good about his decision and all these things. I mean, I want to say it was John Keim of ESPN, had the microphone for the first question. I guarantee you that wasn't the first question he was planning on asking, but I mean, about as quick as you've ever heard somebody ask a question, he literally just said, "Ron, are you surprised?" And he was. Ron Rivera said he was very surprised because he thought Antonio was doing a really good job transitioning to tight end. A lot of people after the fact kind of were, talking between each other and said that they thought he had a pretty nice practice on day 1 of training camp, but so did John Bates, so did Cole Turner. Sammis Reyes had a better day one than day two, I would say. Logan Thomas obviously is still on the mend. And that's something, too, that Ron was asked about, if the competition at the tight end position maybe had an influence on what AGG decided to do. And Ron did acknowledge that was part of the conversation, was the depth, the competition, and the likelihood, I guess, that AGG would make it. Because, Curtis Hodges from Arizona State is back on the field and getting reps with the first team. It is a very, very deep tight end room. Just earlier in the practice, I was talking to a member of the Commander's staff, and we were talking about this tight end room where it may not have like the Rob Gronkowski or Travis Kelce, but I challenge you to find a deeper tight end room in the National Football League. It's going to be hard for you to do.
That was obviously one of my first thoughts. Now, I'm not at practice, as you know. I'm only seeing this and reacting in live time on the radio to the news. And certainly I was surprised, but I don't think I don't think I could say I'm surprised that he was on the outside looking in and really had to, knock the door down, if you will. I think we had talked when we made our 53-man roster projections, and I know I had done something similar on the radio just a day ago. I didn't have him on my list just because I thought, okay, if Logan Thomas is ready to go, that's one. John Bates is two. And then you have to pick basically between an AGG, a Sammis Reyes, a Curtis Hodges, and a Cole Turner for spot number three, right? I'm not taking four tight ends like they did last year. So he was initially one out of probably four guys. Now, if you say, well, Logan Thomas might not be ready, then it would possibly be two out of four guys. But now you've got to ask yourself, if you're AGG, right? If your heart's not in it, is it worth going out and perhaps busting up your knee, perhaps getting a concussion, perhaps doing something to your body if your heart's really not in it? If you know that you're not feeling it. Football is one of those sports, Dave, we all grind through life, right? Nobody likes to do dishes, right? But you do your dishes because you got to do your dishes, right? But if you really love to do dishes, it makes it a whole lot easier to squirt soap and to clean all the dishes and to have a clean kitchen, right? You got to have a passion for what you're doing. But in football, it's a little bit more because you're putting your body on the line. Not every job you have to put your body on the line. And that's, probably what AGG came to, in addition to apparently wanting to pursue his education. I'll just wrap up in saying this, ultimately a 2020 fourth round pick, that's not the end of the world. They get cut all the time. It's not like, oh my God, an embarrassment. You know what it is, though? It's another draft pick, quite honestly, of the Ron Rivera era that they haven't reaped any reward from at all.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, you know what I mean? But it's also an open roster spot. So, look, if you get Jesse Bates for draft capital only, you don't even have to cut anybody. Now you can just add him to the roster and you can just move on with your day.
Why did I know that was coming?
Trying to make it stick. Nobody's joining me on this.
I thought it would take me until segment 2 to hear Jesse Bates, but you got it in there.
Nobody's following me on the Jesse Bates train. I need.
This is becoming a good bit, though. I think this should be the show bit for ever until Jesse Bates winds up here in Washington and then becomes Adam Archuleta. All right, moving on. Some good news for once. Chase Roullier was activated from the active PUP list, so only a couple of days here. And Chase Roullier presumably will practice, David, on Friday in Ashburn with the team. I don't know if he'll be right away into the one unit or whatever, but we know the cracked fibula suffered in the Denver loss last year before the bye. Certainly this is good news. We knew Chase was close, but this officially means that he's ready to go.
Yeah, I love it. And it's just a day of contradictions for my personal, ventures because, Washington Commanders get their starting center back and Tampa Bay Buccaneers may have lost their starting center for the season, depending on what the MRI shows. Ryan Jensen getting hurt at training camp today in Tampa. So very, very contradictive events, but very happy for Chase, very happy for Washington. I'm sure Carson Wentz will be happy to get to physically work with his starting center and start to build that bond. But yeah, if I had to make a prediction, I don't expect Chase to be in any team drills, probably do some position stuff, warm up with the team, stretch with the team, probably do some snaps, stuff like that with Carson. But if I were Ron Rivera in this season of abundance of caution, as the words have become popular, I would probably not put Chase on the field in team drills right away.
Yeah, I think just slowly ramp him up. But remember, he can't even really do individuals or position unit drills on the pup list. So this is the first step, and he counts against the roster anyway. So you might as well ramp him up at your pace. All right, one last news item, and this will be just a quick one. Congratulations to a longtime colleague of mine, Rick Doc Walker, a former tight end, Super Bowl champion, named color commentator of the Washington Commanders TV preseason games on NBC Sports Washington, along with Kenny Albert, who will do and has done play-by-play, and my guy Logan Paulson, who has been a guest of ours and is a frequent guest, or I should say frequent listener, viewer of the Locked On Commanders podcast. Logan, you got to know Logan a little bit here, and he is going to be patrolling the sidelines for the TV broadcast, of which there are 3, right, for the Commanders. So we get a little bit more out of Logan Paulson, and then means, unless I'm missing something, Joe Theismann is not going to be part of the preseason TV broadcast, which is a change. I don't know the reason for that or not, but we wanted to pass that news along. And as well, congratulations to both Logan and Rick Doc Walker. All right, coming up next, again, David was boots on the ground for day 2 of training camp in Ashburn. The offense with another, how do we describe it, kind of day. I'll let David fill in the blank next, right here on LOC. Good to have you with us. But first, we tell you guys about our friends at BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. As a matter of fact, they put out a pretty interesting fan survey thing, and the Commanders fan base did not rank all too favorably for what the subject matter was. You can check it out at betonline.net. We'll have reaction coming up, but you can also find out all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including everything you need to know about Major League Baseball, which is full swing, trade deadline coming up. How is your favorite team going to be affected? And with training camps open, certainly we will be marking over-unders and all of that on BetOnline. They are your continued source for sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. Remain your best spot for podcasts and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or check out your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action at BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, thanks once again for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen and your first view of the day. So, David, you were in Ashburn, Virginia at Command Central for day 2 of training camp, boots on the ground, as I like to say. And the reports that I read, and certainly we can fill in some of the gaps, the reports that I read was another tough day for the offense, and the defense was flying around. How would you describe it in your own words?
It was another rough day for the offense, and the defense was flying around. Yeah,
Okay.
that pretty much summarizes the whole thing. You mentioned it, right? Defense tends to come into training camp with an advantage. They tend to fire off a little bit faster. The offenses tend to take a little bit of time to get going. But it's weird because then in the beginning of the regular season, we usually see that the offenses tend to do better. The defense take a little bit of time because now you have full contact, full action, full speed, and the defenders really haven't had the opportunity to consistently play at that kind of a level during training camp because of the lack of contact, right? So it's just an interesting kind of contrast. But yeah, the defense definitely won the day. Honestly, there were maybe a handful of like really good individual efforts on the offense that you could really applaud. There was only one good play, like full blown play. The Commanders' social media team did a really great job of capturing it and sharing it. It was the absolute dime that Carson Wentz dropped to Jahan Dotson, and it was what was really amazing by it. So if you watch the clip, obviously it looks good, right? And the players went crazy for it. I mean, look, folks on the sideline, there's a media rule, you don't cheer and all these things, but sometimes a play happens, and that was one of those plays, Chris. That where people just went, "Whoa!" Like that was nice. Unfortunately for the fans that were in attendance, it was on the opposite field, so they didn't really have a close view of it, and those who brought binoculars probably had really big football players in the way, standing in the way. But basically, Carson, if you haven't seen the video, he takes the snap, he drops back. I don't even know if he got into a full 3-step drop before he just threw up a rainbow, and Jahan Dotson just ran under it past Benjamin St-Juste, who's about 4 feet taller than Jahan Dotson, and Jahan, it just dropped right into his hands. And He's on the sideline and going out of bounds or whatever, no tackling anyway, so it doesn't matter. But just kind of the end of a rough day for Benjamin St-Juste personally. But we'll get into that here in a minute. But what's really amazing about that play that you don't necessarily get to see in the full video is, one, the trust that Carson Wentz has to have. You have to understand, Jahan Dotson isn't even equal with his defender when that ball, when Carson is making the decision to throw that ball.
Mm-hmm.
So he's trusting that his receiver is going to gain leverage on his defender, get behind his defender, and then put himself in position to make this play over a defensive back that is, not 4 feet, obviously, but significantly taller and longer than Jahan Dotson. So that's step number one, is the confidence and trust that shows between the two players. That's very important. Number two, and really through the rest of it, right, is Jahan Dotson, he runs the route, he tracks the ball, but this is something that is very interesting to see out of a rookie, a year one player. As he's tracking the ball, Chris, he alters his run, he alters his route, he alters the pace and the direction that he's running to make sure, and Terry McLaurin talked about this at the end of practice, but Jahan makes certain that when the ball is coming down, that Jahan Dotson is catching it in space. Jahan has the speed. He could have got under it, waited for it, turned around, tried to high point it over Benjamin St-Juste. But what he did in the moment with the ball flying through the air is said, I need to slow my roll. I need to get into a smoother stride so that when I arrive to where the ball is going to be, I'm in step. And this really tall guy doesn't have the opportunity to knock that ball away from me. And if you watch the end of that route, that's exactly what happens. As that ball drops at about an 82 degree angle into the basket of Jahan Dotson, Benjamin St-Juste is in position. He tries to make a play on the ball, but he can't. And if Jahan Dotson is even one step closer or further behind that ball or gets too far upfield, rather, Benjamin St-Juste makes that play. And that's a great football IQ demonstration, I think, by Jahan Dotson, that a lot of people who watch that clip probably aren't going to gain. But if you've seen the clip and you didn't notice that, go back and watch it again, because that's what happened on the field. A beautiful throw, trust, football IQ by the wide receiver, and Benjamin St-Juste is the victim of all of it.
I think that's really unique analysis. That's a great little breakdown of what you saw. And again, people can go check it out on the Commander social media because it's all over the place. But I think that's a really cool bit of football nuggetry, for lack of a better term, that you're not going to get everywhere, guys. So that's why you got to listen and or watch the Locked On Commanders podcast, because David breaking it down. Now, if it was Jesse Bates, I'm sure he would have intercepted it, right? I mean,
if it was William Jackson, it would have been pass interference.
Well, that's true. That's true. All right, I'm just teasing about the Jesse Bates. I promise I'll try and keep that. I'll try and keep that to 1 or 2 shots per game. All right, one thing that certainly made the headlines, if you will, was a Carson Wentz interception. Kendall Fuller, nice play on the ball, knocking it up into the air into the waiting arms of Cole Holcomb and return for a pick six. You mentioned the pick six at the end of practice on Cole Kelly. Nobody cares about that, quite honestly.
No.
Maybe Ron Rivera and the coaches do. But this one, I'm sure fans and media certainly keep track. Now, listen, interceptions are going to happen. Balls are going to get knocked away. I think St-Juste also had a knockdown soon after that, if memory serves me correct.
He did get a deflection. Percy Butler made a really nice play at one point. William Jackson he did make a nice play, but he also had a very clear DPI. Another
that tells us that the defense, again, the timing, the rhythm, for the most part, was there. And again, that leads us to the overall big picture that the defense is clearly ahead of the offense.
Yeah, that's something that Ron talked about, and honestly, Terry said it too, and even Bobby McCain mentioned it. So, so you have a three-headed monster there: coach, defensive player, offensive player, and that's something that fans, I think, need to remember. One, when they come out and watch; two, when they hear the notes. There's no game plans. There are no game plans. There's no tendencies, right? Carson Wentz isn't going out there and saying, okay, typically when I see this arrangement or this alignment from this defense, it means that they're probably going to do this. I should have this open, or I should be able to manipulate this. There's none of that happening right now. So literally when the ball is snapped, Carson Wentz, Sam Howell, Taylor Heineke, they're seeing whatever is happening in front of them for the very first time. And you're going to have some situations like that in NFL games. So it's healthy for them to see that in training camp like this. But you're also going to, 75 to 85% of what you see on a weekly basis from like week 4 on, depending on the team you're facing, you're already going to know about. Like the Jacksonville Jaguars under Doug Peterson, you're not going to have a lot of film on what they're going to do. So you're just going to have to kind of know the players and some of the tendencies the players have. But as you get into the season, like by week 4, these pro scouts have literally pretty much everything they need on their opponents. Right. They know what they're going to try to do. So again, it's important to kind of keep that all with a grain of salt, because it's a little bit different when you have something to anticipate. And that's what Ron Rivera was talking about specifically is, the defense is winning because the defense, you're just playing defense. That's what Bobby said. Like, if you're in zone, just play your zone. If you're in man, just stay with your man. You don't need to worry about what the play is, just do your job. Offense, you need to worry about what the defense is doing and read it and react to it in kind. And that's something that they can't prepare for right now.
All right, just a couple of news and notes items real quick. Antonio Gibson missing a second day in a row of practice to start off training camp. And did I see this right, that Trey Turner was not in team drills and Sadiq Charles was mostly working at right guard? Anything else?
Sadiq Charles was in for Trey. Yep, Sadiq was in for Trey. Don't think there was any real reason there. I don't know if anybody got an official word. For part of Ron's press conference, he was talking away from me, and there were fans in airplanes. So if he mentioned anything about Trey specifically, I didn't hear it.
Okay. All right. And Antonio Gibson, again, day 2. And Ron said they're going to take it slow. And you certainly don't want, with soft tissue injuries, as we found out with Curtis Samuel last year, you want to err on the side of caution. You just hope that they're being honest and that it is nothing major, because it turned out to be just the opposite with Samuel. All right. We come back on the Locked On Commanders podcast, and we get to the portion of the show that, we have to talk about, again, as we always say, Dan Snyder being deposed in Israel. What happened? What do we know? And also, how sparse were the fans in attendance at training camp? That's next on the Locked On Commanders podcast.
Final segment here on the Locked On Commanders podcast on this episode. And Chris, like you mentioned, we're going to talk about something people don't like hearing about. We don't like talking about it because training camp especially is going on, but we have to do our job, like we said over and over and over again. Dan Snyder finally testifying in front of Congress, but not the way that a lot of people maybe had hoped. I mean, some people expected he just wasn't going to testify at all and find some sort of legal loophole to get out of it, but he does actually testify, closed circuit video and all that stuff. So right now we don't know 100% what's being said or what's being done. But we do know that something is happening because they're going on, 6.5 hours at this point?
Actually, we have an update on that. Now, we're recording this on Thursday afternoon. Our colleague at WUSA 9, and of course, you guys can be watching us on the WUSA 9 Plus app. Darren Haynes, sports director there, just reported that as of around just shy of 4 o'clock Eastern time, which would be almost 8 hours after it started, that indeed Dan Snyder was still testifying in front of lawyers, in front of investigators, in front of what was described to me as the occasional member of the committee popping in and out, but not like the full boondoggle that we saw for Roger Goodell and we saw for the Congressional Roundtable on February 3rd, David. So basically, this is closed circuit video, basically. It is video recorded. He is in Israel. My understanding is he's got a lawyer. My understanding is, again, it's not the full committee or anything like that. It's not the dog and pony show that we've seen a couple of times. It is literally lawyers asking questions, investigators asking questions, follow-ups. There are some breaks, I'm sure, right? But as far as the reporting that we know, and we don't have a transcript yet, we don't have video yet, so we're going to keep it simple and say it's reportedly 8+ hours of testimony, which signifies, and I think you said this to me, it probably signifies he's not pleading the fifth a whole lot if they're doing 8+ hours of testimony.
That's a lot of hours if I plead the fifth. So he's saying something. I mean, whether it's going to be super substantial or he's like, admitting to anything or anything like that is still TBD. But yeah, I mean, 8 hours of I plead the fifth or whatever, if I'm not going to talk about that is a little much. So, I mean, that it just seems to me like he's probably saying something. We'll have to see if it's actually worth anything.
We'll leave it at that because we don't have, again, the transcript or any video. So we will have further updates when they become available. And that's how we'll leave it. But David, just to wrap up this episode, again, you were at practice and you weren't the only one, but you sent me a picture. And this was, I think, midway through the practice. And you see the video or the picture up on the screen right now. There were no fans there on a Thursday for day 2 of training camp. Now, we understand that there's a limited amount of free tickets given out through a lottery system, but there weren't a whole lot of people there. And I don't think I'm missing anything, but you can speak firsthand to it. And I know everyone else, again, did basically the same thing. How concerned should we be over the lack of free tickets not being used by fans on a Thursday at Commanders training camp?
I mean, honestly, it's just embarrassing. You know what I mean? Just for the organization. And again, I don't know the process that went on, but apparently, from what I understand, and again, I don't have to be a part of that mix. That's one blessing that I have. So I guess somebody can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments or on Twitter or something. But my understanding is there was a lottery system, right? And basically, the fans entered the lottery for which days they wanted passes to the event. And then X amount of passes were awarded to people. And basically, from my understanding, and again, this is no official word from the team or anything like that, but just from gathering what information we did, basically, a lot, like all the passes were given out, just a lot of them aren't being used. And again, this isn't like this was an exclusive, very limited amount of fans allowed. Like they had space made for many fans, and the plan was for a lot of people to be in attendance. And yesterday, day one, there was more. That picture was about half an hour into the practice, if I remember correctly. So you're a quarter of the way through, basically. It did get more people did show up. I will say that. So that picture is not indicative of the only fans that showed up. More people did show up, but not many more. I actually joked at one point that I had more people at my COVID birthday party than the Commanders had a practice, which is not true, but that's just kind of the joke that I made. Look, it's embarrassing. I don't know what the reason is, and people's lives change. You entered the lottery, you think hey, I have the opportunity. Some people probably are just like, what, I'm just going to put in for every day and see what I get. And maybe they weren't able to get out of work, or maybe they had an appointment or a life event happened in the process. But I mean, again, this is just kind of one of the things of like, why restrict it when you don't necessarily have to in the environment you're in, right? I mean, this is a team that doesn't have a whole lot of excitement around it, even from its own fan base. I actually got an email today from an odds maker that said the Commanders are one of the teams, like the Commanders, the Lions, the Jets, I think the Jaguars, like the bottom 4 teams in fan excitement in the NFL this season.
That was from BetOnline, which mentioned earlier briefly in the show. I saw the same exact thing.
Right. I mean, so it's just to restrict who can come in or how many passes. Like, I don't know, because I promise you, I mean, even with everything going on with this team, football is still king. Mm-hmm. The Commanders are still an NFL franchise. There's still a proud fan base out there. So this is not a slight towards the fans. From me, there are plenty of fans. There are at least 200 fans that are within driving distance of Ashburn, Virginia, that would have come to practice on day 2 on Thursday, that couldn't because they didn't get a pass. And then the people who had the passes, for whatever reason, again, I'm not blaming them. They have lives. Couldn't use them. And now because they couldn't use them and the people who could use them don't have them, there's just an empty field.
Right.
And I mean, it's just sad. Honestly, it's just sad.
And because the tickets were free or the passes were free, it's not like they can go up on a secondary market type system like game tickets can that you actually pay for, so that once they're gone, they're gone. And then others who do want to go, like you said, or who are within or who do have the time can't go. So it's another tough look for the organization. All right, that's going to do it, guys, for us on this particular edition of the Locked On Commanders podcast. We thank you for being with us as always, and thanks for making us your first listen and view of the day. Now make your second listen and view of the Locked On NFL podcast. Our national NFL experts and insiders keep fans dialed in with the biggest stories and the latest news from around the league, because an offseason doesn't equal a break in the action. And really, we're in training camp. So the offseason has come and gone. So what we're going to do is have a joint episode, a live episode from Command Central, from Commanders headquarters on Saturday. David and I will both be there. So stay tuned for that. We will give you the information on that in due time. If you want to hop in, 301-615-3577 or lockedonwashingtoncommanders@gmail.com. For David Harrison, who's doing a great job covering the Washington Commanders for SI.com's Fan Nation, I'm Chris Russell, one half of the Russell and Medhurst Show on the Team 980 with Pete Medhurst. If you're out and about, please be safe, be kind to one another. Don't you dare drive like a maniac, and show up when you claim free tickets. Thank you for joining us right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast.